doing it. We're not getting
Sounds
paid.
like all of us.
Yeah.
But it's nice because we don't have any, since we don't have any bosses or any advertisers, we can just do whatever we want, So we're coming to Texas. I'm so excited,
We're so excited to have you.
Yeah.
And it looks like so far we've got about 115
Yay.
guests. And so I think we're going to go ahead and kick off here. And I just have to start by saying, well, first of all, I'm Lana Hansen. I'm the statewide organizing director for Texas Blue Action Democrats. And I need y'all to know that not only did we meet our goal, we exceeded our fundraising goal. And it is just so overwhelming. We sent out more than 300 invitations to this event, and we had over 400 donors. And, that's just really the story of grassroots organizing, which is really the story of Blue Action Dems. But before I go into that, I just have to say thank you so much to every single person who contributed and is willing to throw their support behind what Blue Action Dems is doing, to Kathy Carr for inspiring this event, and LaDonna and Michelle for putting together the genius behind the Stampede, to all of our chapter leads who helped amplify it, and then also our amazing panelists that are here today that everybody's so excited to hear from, Carrie and Rachel and Julie and Wendy. We really appreciate your support and your willingness to be here and volunteer your time to make this a success for us. But for those of you maybe that aren't familiar with Blue Action Democrats, I just want to tell a little story sort of about who we are and how we got started, which Blue Action Democrats was birthed from this angst that came out of 2016 of thinking, what could we have done different? How could we have been more involved? What could we have done to have a different outcome? And it was that thought process by a woman named Carrie Collier-Brown, who most of us know, who at the time was on maternity leave with twins and a 4-year-old, sat around with some friends and birthed this plan to start talking to her neighbors in a Southwest Austin neighborhood. And that group kicked off in 2018. And for the midterm election in 2018, they brought the highest voter turnout in the state of Texas. So we knew the proof was in the pudding, and we weren't going to stop there. And we expanded by 3 more chapters, making 4 total throughout San Antonio and Austin. And then started, after the 2018 election, a statewide organizing group that is Texas Blue Action Democrats, and started coordinating with Flip the Texas House and started an initiative there to target our House districts. We know we only need to flip 8 of them after flipping 12 in 2018 to have a majority and to have an opportunity at fair maps in ending the ridiculous gerrymandering that causes, rampant voter suppression and gives the GOP a stronghold in our state. So this is a huge year for us. And, we're going to do it again. We're going to show the highest turnout. And with your help today, we can't be knocking the doors, but we can send the postcards, we can make the calls, we can send the texts and make sure that people get to the polls. Last night at the GOP convention, Ted Cruz said that Texas is the key to national domination and for years to come. And if the Dems win in Texas, it's all over. And so let's get everybody to the polls and let's prove him right. And with that, I want to do a quick housekeeping and let everybody know that we're watching this in webinar and viewer mode. So please just drop any questions you have in the chat. Otherwise, I want to introduce you to our wonderful host, Carrie Marshall, who is the master of relational organizing and the brilliant campaign manager behind Flip the Texas House. Rachel Bitecofer, who we all hang on her word, the political scientist who predicted the 2018 election outcome 5 months before it happened. And of course, our beloved congressional candidates, Wendy Davis for Texas 21 and Julie Oliver for Texas 25. And with that, I'm gonna pass the mic. Thanks so much, y'all.
Yay. Thank you so much, Lana. You're doing such an amazing job with BAD, and I can't wait to see where you shepherd it from here. My name is Carrie Marshall. For those of you I hopefully have met most of y'all out there, but I led the Beto Ambassador Program during Beto's Senate run, which enabled me to build this amazing statewide network, which has led us to try to help in these competitive Texas State House races all across the state. And we spent last year doing targeted voter registration in 17 state house districts that went by under 10 points, that we lost by under 10 points last year. And we did GOTV for the primary. And now we're all about amplifying and lifting up the amazing candidates who are running in those districts. We have a couple of them on the call here today, and we're gonna say hi to them at the end of the call. But I live in Texas 21 and am completely mad about Wendy Davis and Julie Oliver. So it was so neat to see them. They donated to this event. This was totally organic. They donated and we saw their names and thought, well, we have to include them. And it's so not surprising that they donated because they're so supportive of grassroots groups and the sausage making that happens at the grassroots level to help with their races. So, and to have Rachel Bitecofer here is like, I'm pinching myself in every one of these screens I see. So we're gonna kick off talking to Julie and Wendy. And Rachel, a question I have for you that is relevant to them that I'll start off with, in case for some of the people who aren't familiar with your work yet as the election whisperer. I've learned a lot from you, from hearing you talk about things like political polarization, hyperpartisanship, and words that really resonate with everybody organizing in these groups, suburban realignment. And I think all of those things have so much to do with why you consistently have forecasted Texas 21 and Texas 25 months ahead of the other prognosticators to be trending blue. So Rachel, I'm going to first turn it over to you if you'd like to introduce yourself a bit and then talk about how those things impact these races. And then we can talk to Julie and Wendy a bit.
Yeah, I'm happy to, and kind of give it a little bit of a grassroots, like, version of the story, because actually it's the grassroots that helped me actually develop this theory. I was in Virginia coming out of the 2016 election. I was working at a university as a lecturer, as a professor, and also had a little teeny polling outfit there. And I had also been working on the theory in my head, really looking at election outcomes as a story of so much, not just who showed up and voted, but who didn't, the fluctuations of voter turnout, particularly within the Democratic coalition, which is more likely to have fluctuations of turnout. And so when 2016 happened and the media narrative was really focused on white working class voters and Trump doing so well with them, I was looking more at, where did the Obama coalition go? And also, why did so many people who might have cast votes for Clinton spend them on protest ballots or write-ins, which ostensibly might have gone, to Clinton? You can't know, right? And so I said, looking at Virginia, we've got these suburban areas that had been really changing in terms of their demographics. And in Virginia, of course, the evolution is much more advanced. Northern Virginia is ahead of where Texas is. But Virginia Democrats had been winning elections, right? They had a Democratic governor at the time, and they had been making some progress in the state legislature, and they had two Democratic senators, but they still weren't quite delivering with the power that they could be delivering. And so I began to tell people in the state, this Virginia bellwether, the off year election in Virginia is going to be this big barn buster. And it's not only going to go to the Democrats, it's going to go in a huge route, and they're going to pick up a ton of seats in this House delegate contest, which they had a 30-seat deficit in due to gerrymandering. Sound familiar? And, and then I started going around the state and I met you. I met people just like you who had said, I came in with 2016 and I was like, oh my God, what could I have done more to have prevented this terrible thing that's happened? Like, I should have been knocking on doors or working on a campaign or making phone calls. And I wish I would have done more, and now I'm going to do more. And you know, I don't, I'm a stats person and a big empirical data driven type of person, but that doesn't mean I completely ignore anecdotal and personal experience data. And when you're running around a state and you consistently meet women who tell you, you know, I voted, but I didn't even vote in midterms, and now I'm running a grassroots organization, and we're in rural Virginia, and now we have, you know, 400 members in this group or whatever, then you know something's going on underneath the surface. And then, of course, in the suburbs, suburbs of America share a common trait, and two common traits, actually. Number one, they are much more diverse than they used to be. It's not just white people living in the suburbs. And number two, they're not full of boomers anymore. They're full of millennials who are reaching the age of 40 now. Some front-end Gen Zers who are coming out of college and starting to move into the suburbs and start families, the really adventurous ones anyway. And, you know, you get some Gen Xers, of which I am technically one. And these people are much more liberally minded. They're a little lazy about voting, but they're liberally minded. And when a catalyst comes along, say like Donald Trump, they suddenly are like, oh shit, I should probably be like, look at this, you know, like, this is not good. I thought America was like, you know, one way, and actually it's really not like that, and I should probably be engaged. And so when we talk about the Texas realignment, you know, fast forward through the midterms and the big wave, and, you know, the fact that it came and manifested, Texas, I identified right after the midterms. I said, look, there's 9 districts in Texas that, you know, some of it's about Democrats not really understanding this suburban realignment and what's moving it. Because I think a lot of Democrats, even to this day, are thinking about the suburban swing as purely a function of independents or even moderate Republicans changing their mind and getting grossed out by Trump. And the truth is, like, having this conversation now and not 6 months ago, that's actually more true than it was 6 months ago because of the pandemic and the absolute gross mismanagement that Donald Trump has done. So that has added a 5-point additional persuasion element to this campaign that has really made the potential of Texas much, much more viable. But even without that, in the suburbs, again, it's about these new voters coming into the fold who are finally coming into their own in terms of participation. Because when you look at age groups, the big participants are those older age groups, and when you go down the age ladder, participation rate drops off a lot. So Texas, I put out an article on August, I think, 1st of 2019, and I said, hey, there's 18 top targets for Democrats, and 9 of them are in Texas. Right? And you know, when I put up my first forecast, what I wanted to convey to Democrats was all of these districts should be winnable. Like, if you go in there and you really understand the role of grassroots organizing and the potential of that GOTV, neighbor to neighbor, peer to peer investment, especially in terms too of doubling that down where Democrats have not really focused enough energy on in terms of Latino voters in Texas. All 9 of those seats should be winnable. And one of the reasons too is that there's these 9 state house seats too. There's really more, but they think 9 for the majority that could flip as well. And when you think about those compounding, those down ticket races are going to feed competition in those, you know, Wendy and Julie's districts. And those, of course, feed competition for Biden. So I think it's actually hugely beneficial that the pandemic has made Texas more competitive in the presidential, because it's all going to feed each other as long as resources are coordinated well and effort is made. I mean, if you think about really, like, for every ticket that gets submitted for Biden, if it gets filled out all the way down the ballot for Biden, Wendy and Julie and the House of State House candidates and down, like, there's no reason that on November 4th we're not looking at 6, 7, maybe 8 House seats, the majority plus in that House of State House. I was going to call it House of Delegates because of Virginia State House, and you're looking at a political revolution. in the state of Texas because of these two forces meeting together. That turnout surge from the Trump effect, which is what my modeling is all about, and then this real potential for pure independent swing. Pure independents are really swinging now. And of course, you've got, Lincoln Project has put Texas now too in the radar, and that's a nice asset to have too because of the, potential to really highlight the bad management, Trump, Abbott, and then all of these candidates, I would say, should be tied to Trump and Abbott as quickly as closely. It's like,
Yeah, and I want to remind everyone, if we flip at least 6 congressional seats, which I totally believe we will, then we'll have a Democratic majority caucus representing Texas in the U.S. Congress, which will just be, as a native Texan, it's really exciting. And I know two of these ladies are 2 of the seats.
And you take Texas off the map for the Republicans in terms of the Electoral College. I mean, this is just the way I think, and everyone knows that I think much more boldly than, say, like the average Democratic DNC-er. I look at Texas and I'm like, you totally handicap the National Republican Party if you take Texas. They cannot win the presidency ever again, like under their current constitution without it. So it's like, and you can win it, everything is there if the pieces get moved correctly.
Yes, and we're going to do it. So I thought it would be interesting, Julie, I would love for you to talk a bit about what your really pioneering effort in targeted voter registration over the last really 3.5 years at this point, I think, and how using that data and taking advantage of the growth of your district has been a key part of you flipping that district and have Rachel speak to that as well.
I would be happy to. I met the guy who started the targeted voter registration effort by mail, block walking. I actually went to his house, knocked on his door. He opened the door and he pointed at me like, "I want to talk to you." And I was like, "Oh God, what did I do?" And then he starts telling me about this incredible idea he has about targeted voter registration, finding Democrats who move. Democrats. I was like, this is genius. Because so many voter registration efforts cast the net wide. You don't know, and if you are deputized in Texas to get somebody registered to vote, you have to be open and available to register everybody. And so I just thought it was a really genius element to add the layer of looking at somebody's voting history and then offering them a voter registration form. So they piloted it at this for 3 state house races in 2018. We were the beneficiary of some of those, but we weren't part of the pilot, so to speak. And the turnout percentages were astonishing. Like 80% of the people who turned their voter registration forms actually ended up going to vote.
That's great.
So we did it in our primary, or right before the primary. We sent out a batch, and we put a letter about who I am, why I'm running. I even put an out for the person on the other end who was going to receive us, that you may not even vote for me, but I want you to have the gift of being able to vote. So please sign this and mail it back in. And we found that 35% turned their forms back in, which during an off year, non-election year, and doing no chase was extraordinary. 57% turned out to vote in our primary. 57%. Texas hovers at around 25% turnout. Mm-hmm. So we're pleased with it. We're about to send out, can't remember, 10,000 more, maybe not quite 10,000, but in 8 days. And then we'll do it again at the end of September to make sure we scrape everybody. I want to remind everybody, you have to be registered to vote in the November 3rd election by October 5th. So we will do one final pass there in the month of September to make sure we get every potential Democrat into our race, because we need it. We're a gerrymandered district. We need every vote we can possibly get.
That's awesome. Rachel,
and then can I ask really quick, like, when do you have picked up this technique and are using it in yours?
Yes, thankfully. So the organization that's doing this work, that young man whose door Julie knocked on when she was door knocking, his name is Jeremy Smith, and he has a whole team of people now and has raised, really good money to be able to have the resources needed to do this in every congressional district of the state. And they're coordinating not only with campaigns, but they're coordinating with some of our grassroots organizations as well. Like, for example, Beto's Powered by People organization, where he's brought a lot of volunteer energy and they're looking for something to do. And of course, this is matching them with the kind of work that'll be impactful.
That's great.
Yeah, and Wendy, an interesting part about your district, or my district, is I think at I feel like it's the bookends of San Antonio and Austin is so interesting, and how it's still somewhat rural in between, but it's also becoming more suburban between Bexar and Travis counties. And I just thought if you could talk a little bit about kind of the importance of turnout, both in those urban areas, plus how you're tackling the very, very rural parts of your district as well, out in the hill country.
Yeah, so both Julie and I are in districts where what was called the blue spine of I-35 runs straight through the heart of them. There was an excellent article, I think it was in the Dallas Morning News, it might have been the Houston Chronicle, a couple of months ago, talking about the incredible growth along that corridor, and not only that, but matching it with extraordinary blowout in voter registration, and matching it also with a propensity of more Democratic voters to be demonstrated in that growth than Republican voters to be demonstrated in it. And that's data that drives that, but we can all see that with our own eyes as well, right? We know that Hays County, immediately south of Austin, went blue, and it didn't just like eke over a little bit blue in 2018. It flipped hard, and it's going to stay there. It's not turning back. I met with the superintendent of public schools when we could still actually meet with people in person a few months ago in the Comal ISD. And that's where New Braunfels is, of course. And he said that they were building their 4th and 5th high schools simultaneously.
Wow.
Because they're growing so fast, and that about 90%, he literally used those words, of their growth was coming from California, not from other parts of the state. And I know that Comal County is not going to be blue in 2020, but it's going to be bluer. And that's really how we're going to win this race. And it's how Julie's going to win her race too. If you look at the turnout that we had in our primary, Julie and I, in our 2 districts, had the, by far, highest turnout of Democrats of any congressional district in the state, even the bluest of blue ones. And that really speaks to our growth. And that growth, of course, if it shows up in a primary like that, you can darn well better believe it's going to show up in the general election.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely true. I mean, that's why, like, your 2 districts, and you actually don't have, these districts don't have as high of college educated population, but the populations that it does have are extremely prime. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't take the work, right? As one thing I was thinking of going back to my ratings, and I kind of pick up how like the boys had done theirs for 30 years. It's been this system of lean. I'm actually thinking of like just making up a whole new system of how ratings work, so that they're more clear as to what I mean by them, because it takes work. Like the districts, a lot of the 40 basically that Democrats picked up in 2018 in my ratings, like my forecast envisions them staying in Democratic hands, but it also envisions that there'll be lots of grassroots work and lots of money spent to get there. So I'm thinking of changing that. But yeah, I do think that both of these districts, I think too, the passion inside the tales that go into the Austin gerrymanders have really, it guaranteed, super enthusiasm. I mean, they're small populations in terms of size, geography, but they're big in terms of numbers and potential. So I think you want to try to mitigate like the Trump advantage in those rural areas, outlying areas, And, you know, so you don't ignore them, but you just really want to maximize that turnout in the suburban and Austin center parts of those districts.
Absolutely. We have a question from the Q&A that's relevant to both the candidates and Rachel, so we'll ask that and then we can let Wendy and Julie go. But they said, I live in a part of Austin where districts 25, 21, and 10 all come together, which just kind of tells you everything you need to know about how gerrymandered Austin is. With the upheaval of college campuses and the impact of voter registration on campus, which organizations do you see doing the most important work to capture those thousands of votes in the student population? And this just goes to the general question of like, how do we get college kids registered and to the polls this fall with so much upheaval right now with the virus? I guess, Julie, we want to start with you?
Yeah, you know, this is one of the challenges with the pandemic is the fact that, you know, both Wendy and I rely heavily on UT being in school, or at least students being registered at school. And we want to ensure that the kids who got registered to vote, let's say for the primary of this year, stay registered to vote. And then we will mail them voter registration, or not voter registration, excuse me, applications to vote by mail, since they will not be in their county during the election. We want to ensure that they can still vote and make an impact in District 21, in District 5, and in District 10. So that's going to be part of it. You know, Texas Democratic Party is doing part of that. We will invest in it. I mean, I'm not going to leave it up to the party. We will actually be making a very concentrated effort on ensuring that those students can vote. And I will say that I know Wendy's team is very data driven. We are also incredibly data driven. And we need to ensure that we capture every potential vote that UT has. Who knows if they're going to show up this fall or not? I do suspect there are going to be a lot of kids who want to move back to Austin. They're probably tired of being cooped up at home. Whether they will be able to go back to school is another story, but I do think there will be kids moving back to Austin in the fall.
Yeah, can I just say, I mean, I don't mean to sound callous at all. I definitely wish Texas had shut down. I wish it would shut down right now, and Abbott would not convene classes at UT for the health and safety of the people in Austin and on that campus. And it's not good that they're doing it, but you know, if they are, it's actually good for these two races, that those students are on campus and voting and registering to vote on campus. And you know, there cannot be enough campus organizing effort. Every vote that students on UT or these other college campuses that interlap on these 9 districts is absolutely priceless. And getting polling locations on campus, if students are on campus, should be a top priority of every candidate and campaign that is running in a district that has campus and student populations in it.
Right. And Wendy, you have parts of UT as well, plus Texas State, in addition to so many colleges in between, right?
Yeah, so the entire West Campus of UT is in District 21. And that is an area that we had already thankfully done a huge amount of work in leading up to the primary, doing a mapping project of all the students and where they lived and doing the door knocking in there and trying to register as many as possible. And Julie's right, you know, we'll be able to take advantage of that by reaching out to those students, whether they return to campus or not, and encouraging them to continue to vote that vote they would have provided on campus. So that's one thing. And then we also have a huge number of students from Texas State that live in Congressional District 21. I'm sure there are 725 as well. Julie and I both share, you know, in common parts of Hayes County and Travis County. And so those same kinds of efforts are going to need to be underway. There's no question. And then, you know, whether it's done virtually or whether it's done on campus, there are a lot of great organizations that are continuing to work to try to make sure that our students have the resources they need to vote in the fall. My nonprofit that I started a few years ago, Deeds Not Words, Jolt, Move Texas, Texas Freedom Network. There are a number of organizations that are working specifically focused on the youth vote. Deeds Not Words focuses on high school and college. Battleground Texas is also really focusing on high school. Move is mostly focused on college, so is Jolt. And so between all of us, we're continuing to try to make sure we're engaged in the grassroots effort it takes to communicate with these students and get them ready.
Yeah, and given so you have the 2018 data, I would definitely get a diagnostic on the role that campus voting played in your 2018 data, so you have a sense of what you need, what target you need.
100%, really good advice.
So exciting. We're all so thankful and fortunate that y'all are running in these two districts that crisscross through Austin. Okay, we're gonna let Wendy and Julie go, but y'all please sign up to help these candidates if you haven't already. WendyDavisForCongress.com and JulieOliver.org. And love you both so much. Thank you so much for all the hard work you're doing. Home stretch.
Looking forward to meeting you guys when I come to bring the show into Texas.
Thank you, Rachel.
Us as well. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Aren't we lucky, Rachel?
Very. Oh, you guys are just, it's like here in Virginia, that 2018 cycle, we had these amazing women emerge. They were just unbelievable. It was a cycle of female domination. And I know California, it was the same story. And yes, it's great that Texas is getting their turn now. Yes. So glad they could join us today. So a couple more quick questions for you, and then we have a lot of questions coming in from. Great. Let's do it. Let's have at it.
Yay. One thing I wanted to mention, we had our runoff last week, the Democratic and Republican runoff, but the Democrats were the only party with statewide runoffs for River Commissioner and Senate. So we had a huge advantage. It was a great opportunity to mobilize statewide as much as possible to get out the vote. And we had over 1 million Democrats showed up to vote last week, even though most of them could not vote by mail, and masks weren't even required. So polling locations were closed because election workers were understandably fearful. So I would love to know what you think of that turnout, which was about the same as primary level turnout in Texas, I believe.
Yes, amazing. When you get runoff turnout like that, and I don't remember if it was Wendy or Julie, but I think it was Wendy. But now it will be Julie because I said that. Anyway, in my modeling, one of the data points I collected for 2018 was primary turnout, comparing it to the Republicans and Democrats, right? And I wanted to see, it does, Republicans often outperformed Democrats in primary turnout. Like even that district I'm in, not in, but next to in Virginia, the Republican got way more primary votes than the Democrat. And that was one of the reasons, I kept, being pretty bearish that it was going to flip. And she ended up winning. The Democrat won and it flipped. And so ultimately what I figured out was that, it's not a good indicator. If Republicans outperform in primaries, they tend to outvote Democrats in primaries. They're better primary voters. But when Democrats have strong primary turnout, it almost always means they're going to win. Okay. So it's a really good indicator for you guys, especially in a runoff. I mean, a runoff is not even a primary, as you just pointed out. So that's a really good sign. And then before I forget, I want to make one more comment. The election worker problem is a huge, huge issue. And so if anybody's listening to this, or you working in the state know, there needs to be a massive recruiting effort for under 40 poll workers for this one cycle. I call it kind of like get off your ass for one cycle and help out the old people. Because obviously people who are, the poll working workforce, average age is 80 or something. You really need young people to step up, or we're going to have what we saw in Milwaukee during the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race that occurred in their primary, where there was only 6 polling locations open. And that's just a catastrophe. You don't want that to happen. I promise you, like the footage from Georgia of all those people standing in line, most of them were African American, okay, for 12 hours to cast a ballot. That was heartwarming that they were standing there in line and they wouldn't give up, and there were people crying about getting shut out and getting in, and like that stuff makes us happy. But I promise you, there were thousands of people who just didn't go and vote because of the lines. Like, it has a massive deterrent effect when people know that it's going to be a big deal to go vote, because not everybody is committed like that. So really, Democrats want to deal with this poll working problem, and in order to deal with it, it's going to take a massive outreach and recruitment effort to get younger people to step up and serve. They have to be trained. It's not easy. It takes like some training in advance. But I really think that Texas needs to get, the party needs to be very serious about that.
Yes, I was braced for the worst turnout wise. I was really so pleased to see how many Democrats masked up and made it to the polls. Mm-hmm. Since this was a fundraiser for postcard stamps to at least 50,000 Democratic voters in Texas, since we smashed the goal, it looks like we'll be able to send even more postcards, which is so exciting. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit, since we have a big audience of dedicated block walkers here, I think. And so since we're all having to pivot to things like postcards and phone banking and text banking, I would love to know just your thoughts on those methods for voter contact, and just remind us all that it can be powerful too, even though we can't block walk as much as we wish.
Yeah, I don't have any data on the efficacy of handwritten postcards, okay? And obviously the nice thing about them is that grassroots groups can do them because they don't cost money. They pull everybody together into these intimate environments. Not anymore, but it used to be something where people would get together and they'd all write them together, and it was super satisfying. And then, you hear stories from people who do door knocking, and they'll say that the voter says, "Oh, I got your postcard and it was so nice." So, like anecdotally, we hear that they're effective, right? As a political scientist, what I would want to see is an experimental design where, you have races, you have treatment groups that are treated to these handwritten postcards, others that are not. Is there a turnout difference, right? And I am reasonably sure that somewhere out there's got to be Democratic Party experiments that have done this, but I don't have access to them. So I just don't know. I can't say with confidence that they're doing anything. I would say that they're probably more effective than a photo printed direct mailer, because something handwritten is likely to get looked at, right? When you get a postcard in the mail, you're going to look at it and read, and I would assume there are certain types of writing and message that would be more effective than other, right? But yeah, so I do think, it's probably better than a generic commercial, direct mailer, because most of those, I can't stress this enough, I'm going to do a whole episode on direct mailers, because Democrats really don't do it well. Direct mailers generally have the time of I take it out of the mailbox, oh, it's a direct mailer, and I put it in recycling, So I feel like a postcard, I'm going to take it out and be like, oh, someone sent me a postcard. Where's it from? Oh, this is interesting. I mean, I'm at least going to read it for a while, So I think if you are creative about the writing, be creative about where the postcard comes from too. I think maybe do it from some place. That would be cool, I think if you can get them to read it, that's the main thing, is that, the hardest thing about direct mail is just getting the person, the recipient, to actually consume the material.
To put their eyeballs on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the Blue Action Democrats gals said that they had a 30% conversion rate on their postcards that they sent to sometimes voters in the 2020 primary. So that's awesome.
Conversion into what? Voting?
Into voting. And maybe Michelle will chime in here as well.
Yeah, I mean, the way to test that is you've got, two groups. You send some of them postcards, you send the other ones, see if this group turns out more than the other. You have to make sure that you're controlling for other factors. You wouldn't want to send, the postcards to the highly educated group that is more likely to turn out, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And what other advice do you have for grassroots groups who are kind of orbiting, aligned with the party, but orbiting outside the party infrastructure?
I would say this, there's a massive pandemic going on, and because of your unfortunate luck of living in the state of Texas that is controlled by Greg Abbott, who is, just seems committed to sentencing people to death through bad public policy direction. A Republican Party might knock doors, might physically send people out to knock doors, right? And phone calls and emails and stuff like that on this side versus door knocking on that side, I don't know. I just don't know. I worry about that. So it may be that people need to think about what happens if the other side is knocking doors, literally knocking the doors.
Mm-hmm. I know a lot of campaigns are considering doing lit drops, at least leaving a door sticky or a door hanger. And I'm sure out of that, some conversations would end up happening. But
I'm a big fan of the door hanger anyway, and let me tell you why. You have to look at it for at least a little bit longer than the direct mail. But, I really strongly urge any candidate to watch the Bitecofer direct mail special when it comes out, because most direct mail is not done well.
Interesting. One thing you wanted to make sure we talked about was ballot education.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. So the reason the Republicans got rid of the straight ballot is because it was no longer going to benefit them. It's going to benefit Democrats. And so now you guys, and here's the problem. In the world of drop off, where a voter will vote for Biden and then not fill out the rest of the ballot, that problem is a problem that plagues the Democratic voter side more than the Republican side for a myriad of reasons. Now, Democrat, generic analyst A would say, well, that's just because Democrats, they just do this problem and they don't get it, And, some of it is that, but that's not all of it. And especially if non-college educated voters are realigning to the Republicans, right? So it's not genetic. I think you can fix it, in other words, with the proper type of voter outreach and education, you can teach people, hey, fill out the rest of the damn ballot, right? And some of that comes from the fact that for a long time, and this is very another technique that I have been trying to urge Democrats to move away from, many high propensity Democrats who always vote don't get any voter contact at all, right? So they never get even one, door hang that says, hey, dude who always votes, we know is a Democrat, when you go vote for Biden, make sure you vote all the way down straight ticket, because the fate of the free world hangs on it. We can end the Texas gerrymander or something like that, And so you guys have this it's a major problem to solve, because you have to teach voters to fill out the whole ballot. You want people standing at every polling location with vote. I don't know what the rules are in Texas. In Virginia, you can be there, but you have a certain distance you have to be away, but you can actually literature at the polling location. I don't know if that's how it is in Texas, but wherever, if you can, you want to hand people a little slip of paper that says, fill the whole ballot out, especially, and most people wouldn't do this at a high, this is a heavy Democratic precinct, right? But you would want to do it at a heavy Democratic precinct in a competitive district, because that's probably where a lot of that fall off is happening, because they don't know, aren't educated about voting the full ticket, and they vote Democrat for president and then they don't vote the rest of the ticket, you know what I mean? So it's neglect of education. It's not genetic, it's neglect of communication, education, and work, not just that people are genetically less likely to fill out the whole ticket and if they happen to be Democrats, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So in other words, it's a product of how Democrats electioneer versus how Republicans electioneer. And the reason, the incentive, I will throw this out for all the activists and people who are working is to fix it, is that if everybody who votes Biden in Texas votes in these districts, I mean, not statewide, but in these districts, also fills out the whole damn ballot, you guys will definitely take the House against because that drop-off problem, I mean, there will be, you don't want to be in a situation where Biden wins the 21st, he wins that district, but you know, your House candidate doesn't because too many people voted for Biden and didn't bother to vote for the House race.
Right.
God, that would suck. Right?
That would so suck.
Yeah, right. Don't let that happen.
Not
Just
gonna let
because
that happen.
you know, that ballot education end didn't happen, you know. So
and I know some groups, like I think it's the Funky East Dallas Democrats are planning to do lit drops where they're going to do door stickies, big stickies, and put them on doors, and it'll be the full ballot.
Yes.
You think if they get it in advance, like, you know, in a passive way like that?
Oh yes, definitely.
So
because like where those are happening, my guess is the way that that's happening are these voters who are never contacted by anything because they're in heavily Democratic precincts. And so people are communicating with them and, you know, they are completely out, you know, they're not us. So they don't really understand the rest of politics. They know they're going to vote for Biden because they hate Trump and they always vote for president, but they don't understand the rest of politics.
So y'all out there, full page ballot door stickies.
In my opinion, there should be as much coordination and centralization as possible, right? Where the Republicans have a massive advantage over the Democrats is that there's much centralization and coordination for everything the Democrats do. There's like 15 groups doing the same thing, right? And so, you know, why knock a door for Biden in, you know, Wendy's district that isn't also, you know, given that voter Wendy's name and the House of Delegates name candidate there, right? And the Senate race, and you know, should be all for it.
Oh my gosh, we could talk for hours just about that subject. I love it. We have a question from Zach. Dr. Bitecofer, you correctly predicted that 40 seats would flip in 2018. Yeah, I think I heard you talk about how, I think you predicted 40 to 41 and we picked up 42, is that right? But you really 40,
I said 42, but we would have had 42, but NC9, as you know, had that guy that was stealing Democratic absentee ballots, right? And they had to rerun it. And then the other one was Sweet Kara Eastman in Nebraska 2, who sat in a highly college educated district, in a district that was absolutely primed to flip, but she beat out a like a party mainstream candidate the party really wanted because they thought he fits the district, and what matters is someone who's very moderate and Kansas or Nebraskian, and she was more Bernie Sanders-ish. And so they thought, well, she'll never win because she's too progressive. And I was like, no. What matters is the district, dude. It's like, this is like it's hot to trot. It's highly educated. If you, I mean, if she was if she was like, I'm a self-avowed socialist and I want to abolish the United States because this land is stolen and that, you know, we need to abolish ICE or whatever. I mean, it'd be one thing. She was definitely progressive, but she wasn't, you know, and the party just bailed on her. They didn't spend, and she did actually. What's really interesting about that race is it's a race that has been historically close for several cycles. And in 2016, the party did support the nominee. They spent very aggressively to help him win, and she did exactly the same well as he did in a presidential year with all that party support. So this year, I'm happy to say that she is the nominee again, and the D trip has put her on the red to blue list.
Awesome. So the other part of Zach's question was, in 2020, what is our ceiling? Can we gain another 25? And when is the next ratings update from the Election Whisperer?
So the ceiling for Texas, okay, you know, I mean, the ceiling would be that 9 House seats. And I mean, I'm not saying you guys are going to get 9 House seats. If I ran shit, you'd get 9 House seats, even though that makes me sound like a megalomaniac. But I don't. So you're not going to have 9 House seats. But that'd be the ceiling. And then in terms of the House, State House, I mean, yeah, you guys need 9, right? But you could probably get 14, 15, I don't know. I have a whole list of like everywhere that's highly college educated and diverse. Now, what that would mean is coming after the Latino vote in a serious way. That's never happened. And that means a 2-pronged approach. And if you want to hear about what that approach would be like, you'll have to watch the next episode of The Election Whisperer, which I'm happy to say co-stars Joaquin Castro and is on Wednesday.
Nice. I was 2 things. I was about to ask about your suggestions for what Texas should be doing to better reach Latino voters, but also what do you think the ceiling is? Just how many seats in general nationwide do you think we could potentially pick up in the House? Because we're assuming we're not.
Well, I mean, if they were to clear, like, you know, really clean it up in Texas. I mean, I think realistically, you know, if Democrats pick up 6 in Texas, I think they've got another handful of 6 seats. They've got 2 guarantees in North Carolina from a court-ordered redistrict that basically, you know, guarantees 2 North Carolina seats, you know. And then beyond that, they've got, you know, maybe 3 or 4 other seats. So it's definitely it could potentially add another dozen.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Before I take up too much more time, we'll take a couple more questions, but do you have any quick thoughts you can give us on better reaching the Latino voters without ruining your upcoming episode?
Well, you know, I mean, so when we think about Latino voters, George W. Bush carried them basically half and half in 2000 when he ran. I mean, obviously he was governor of Texas. That helped. Spoke Spanish, had cowboy boots. He wasn't a raging racist. That also helps. Ran on a platform of comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship because the GOP was still a, you know, bigger tent party that seemed to want to win national elections without, you know, suppressing the vote to do it. And then you have McCain, you know, come out with the bipartisan immigration bill that Bush, you know, kind of championed, and the party just loses its mind. And by the time McCain runs, he has to run against that bill. So, you know, we see the Latino vote kind of move, right? And it is definitely slated to the Democrats, but it is by no means performing at the level that it would be if Latino voters were getting strategically messaged, highlighting, you know, in a cultural war type of way, what the GOP platform is like the rhetoric and platform is like against Latino voters. And the reason why that doesn't happen, I assume, is number one, the party official apparatus is extremely, extremely wimpy about negative messaging and hitting, you know, hard hitting emotive ads, like very, very, and especially candidates, but, you know, the party apparatus and even the super PACs that have most money are very bearish about that. And in order to highlight how frankly bigoted the Republican Party has become about Latinos, you really have to, you know, those ads are going to be hard hitting. But, you know, they make the assumption that all Latinos know this. No, okay? Most Latinos are not following news and politics. They maybe have a vague understanding that, you know, Trump is racially hostile, but they do not have a working, you know, understanding of how racially hostile the modern GOP is to them. And the GOP is really shrewd because they really get descriptive representation in terms of elections a lot better, ironically, than Democrats do. So, like, when they want to win an election and there's a heavy Latino population, they go and they recruit Latino candidates to run in it. I mean, we just saw that happen in California 25 to great success. So, like, Latinos are, you know, actually, I think voting for Republicans at higher rates than you would expect, given especially this last 4 years. So I think messaging needs to be much more aggressive on that. And then, of course, the real problem is the targeting. the resources that are devoted to it, and the effort that is devoted to it. And the reason I think is that the first stab at this was done when the first wave of Mexican, but now it's more South American and Mexican, but when Mexican immigrants first came over, they, especially legal immigrants, the effort to turn out, it wasn't that successful. And really what we're talking about now are these millennial and Gen Z second generation immigrants. That's where the money is. Like, those people would be, I think, really, really prime targets for Democratic voting and for Democratic turnout, but they have not been really focused in on. I'm saying they've been totally ignored, but they haven't, in my opinion, if I was running like the D-TRIP or DNC, knowing how important Texas was and how primed it could be demographically, like 4 years ago after Trump won, I would have been like, let's handicap them to Texas and just really nuclear bomb, like in terms of like building the nuclear bomb. What's that project, the Manhattan Project? I would have been like, let's go after Texas and just really pour a ton of money and investment into Latino mobilization and turnout, because we can take them at both Texas and Florida. And if we do that, yeah, we want to shore up and we want to win the Midwest. We're going to put a ton of effort there. But if we undercut them in those two states with that Latino vote, it will really kill them. So that's what I would have been looking to see. And couldn't tell, like, there's additional investment for sure, but it's not like that. And we'll be talking to Chuck Rocha, who showed just a little bit of extra attention can yield great results. He just got such great results for Bernie organizing Nevada in terms of Latino voters. And he did it through the grassroots, right? It was simple recipe grassroots organizing, and that really bore a lot of fruit. So it just seems like, to me, that's what the future of the party is, in that Southwest domination. And I'm all about some domination.
And we can't wait to hear. I know you're going to have some special Texas coverage coming up in the next few weeks, so we will be waiting on pins and needles. And I put Rachel's Twitter handles and her podcast in the chat here. And Rachel, if you have a couple more minutes, we have 2 Texas House candidates who have joined us. I know you know Jennifer Skidden.
I do know her.
Jennifer's running in HE 106 up in Denton County, around Frisco, right? And here, Elizabeth Beck running in HE 97 in Fort Worth. I think both of those districts were probably considered long shots after 2018, but these women have been running such strong campaigns and laying such good groundwork that I'm really excited y'all are here. So I wanted to say hi to y'all real quick and see if you have anything, a question or anything you want to mention to Rachel. Jennifer, why don't you go first?
Okay, thanks, and thanks for letting me pop on here. Hi, Rachel, it's good to see you.
Hello.
So for anyone that doesn't know, I was honored to have Rachel on a live chat with me at the very beginning of this pandemic madness. And so she's been so helpful ever since. And it kind of gave me like a huge boost. We have a hot to trot district out here with over 50% college educated. And, we have over 58% families with kids in school. So that, along with the demographics and everything, we have a really good chance to win here. Everything that was said today was awesome. This was a really good event. The topics were awesome. We're gonna, we're thinking about doing postcards as well. So actually, after this one day in the next week or two, I'd love to pick everyone's brain, get that going on our side too.
And Jennifer, do you want to tell us a little about like exactly where your district is and the overlapping congressional district? Because I think do you overlap with TX3?
I'm actually all in the middle of Texas 26, which right now is Michael Burgess. But we also, we do overlap with 2 precincts with Texas 24, which is Candace Valenzuela, who is a good friend of mine. So I was so excited to see her win the runoff. So we can campaign together in our 2 precincts. But 106 is in Northeast Denton County, and it has the Denton County side of Frisco, Prosper, and then all of the Colony and Little Elm, which we just found out not too long ago that all but 1 precinct in Little Elm voted for Beto. So that suburb went almost totally blue. And we have Sanger and Aubrey. So we're kind of a good mix of suburbs and rural.
That's so cool. And Elizabeth, hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I would love for you to tell our people here and Dr. Bitecofer about how many phone calls y'all have made, and tell us a little about your district as well.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me today. And also thank everyone that has donated to be here today, because the work that y'all are doing has already benefited my campaign. And I know it is crucial to flipping the Texas House. So thank y'all all so much for being part of this massive effort. I am running in House District 97, which is Southwest Fort Worth and Tarrant County. It is one of those districts that Beto narrowly lost in 2018. And that we did not think that we could, in 2018, it was not even on the radar as a pickup. And now it is, because of the hard work that the previous candidate did and just the changes in our demographics. And quite honestly, Trump, we are one of those highly educated districts that we talk about. TCU sits smack in the middle of our district, and that plays a huge part, our role in the folks that live in and around here. So we are really excited to take that across the finish line this cycle. We have an amazing fellows program that are some of the hardest working folks in the state. And we have made over 34,000 phone calls to date, encouraging voters in the district to vote by mail. And so that has just been to residents that are 65 and older. And I think at this point, we've been able to make 4 or 5 passes through that universe to make sure that we're getting everyone that we can to register to vote by mail, or to request that ballot, so that they can vote without putting their life at risk. And so we are now switching gears to voter contact and persuasion and talking to the voters to get them out there in November.
So cool. It has been so awesome to watch you two and so many of these other awesome candidates build these campaigns that are real machines. I'm so proud of y'all. It's really exciting.
Thank you.
Oh, y'all are such a big part of that too. So
yes.
Thank you for that.
Nice to be along with the ride.
Yes, thank you for helping us out, because we can't, Elizabeth and I both know we can't do this by ourselves. It's going to take a whole effort, even across the state, for every district.
Yes, and hopefully we'll get Rachel down here in person at some point to meet everyone as in person as possible. Yay, thanks ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hate to end it. We have so many questions that have come in, but I want to be really sensitive to Dr. Bitecofer's time. So please follow her on Twitter. Her podcast is a blast.
I can tell everybody too, like if you submit your questions at the website for Election Whisperer, I can get to them on that show.
Oh, wonderful. Yay. And you're releasing a show every week, right?
Yeah, every week. And we did do one question and answer special because we get so many questions. They're so good,
And when do you think you'll be talking about Texas again on the podcast?
Well, like I said, I'm coming to Texas to do a special. I'll be with Beto on that special, but that's just one little, party. I think he's going to help co-host it. And I am going, but I'm very much at the very beginning of organizing that. But the goal of that show will be to highlight the races there, and analyze the State House and the Congress and the Senate, and possibly at the presidential level too. And Beto has very generously agreed to co-host it. So I'll be looking to talk to candidates, on camera, and I'm really excited to put the show together. That's very much at the very beginning of that. But, I think it's going to come up quite a bit, and we're talking about in the Latino voting episode this week. I'm sure I'll be talking a little bit about Texas there too. And I will say too, in terms of this closing comment, the persuasion message of 2020 has been really defined by COVID, right? The mismanagement, both by Donald Trump and by these state governors, in the case of Abbott. So, you know, I really just urge candidates to be making it very crystal clear that America alone is struggling under this pandemic. In other countries, their children are going to be going back to school in the fall because their government shut down nationally, managed the pandemic nationally, killed their curve, right? They bent their curve, and now they're reopening in a test and trace environment. Right? That did not happen in the United States because the Republican Party cannot govern. They are incompetent and must be replaced.
Hear, hear. Well, thank you for giving us this little win behind our sails, and we're going to keep working hard and make you proud, and we can't wait to get you down here and have a distanced margarita and maybe some barbecue.
Yeah, it'll be great. And I will be wearing a full hazmat suit. No, I'm just kidding. But we will be socially distanced, but we're going to be together. But it's going to be a great episode. I'm super excited, and we'll work it out somehow with our masks and our whatever, our hand sanitizer. But it's, you know, so stay healthy, guys. But yeah, stay healthy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Same to you, Rachel. We'll
All right.
see you online. Okay. Thanks, everyone.